Hi, everybody. Thank you again for attending today's webinar. We're happy to have you joining us for what we hope you'll find to be an informative and an interesting presentation on becoming a paralegal. My name is Joshua Snow. I'm going to be the moderator. Just before we begin, I wanted to mention that this session is actually going to be recorded, and then when it's done, we're going to send a copy out to all of the participants after the session. So throughout the session, we're going to be able to answer any chat questions that you have. If you notice when you scroll your mouse or whatever down to the bottom of the screen, you'll actually have a couple Q&A options. So if at any point in the presentation you have a question you'd like us to answer for you, just go ahead and maneuver down there and then ask a Q&A, and we'll be happy to address it. If it's something we can answer directly, we'll do that, or if it's going to be answered later in the presentation, we'll let you know as well. So my name is Joshua Snow. I am the moderator for our webinar. I have several years of experience in academic advising and admissions. And I'm also happy to introduce our featured guest, Mr. Joe Spada. He's the director here of our Paralegal Studies program. Not only does he oversee our program, he also teaches several components within the program, as well as he also has 20 years of experience as a federal attorney, and he's a member of the Massachusetts Bar, as well as the U.S. District Court, the District of Massachusetts, and the First Circuit Court of Appeals. So just going to go over the agenda real quick for you. We're going to talk a little bit about why BU, why our program, as far as what is a paralegal in terms of what they do. We're going to talk a little bit about the paralegal field, give you a little bit of an overview of our program, go over a little bit of the curriculum and instructors, and then towards the end we'll talk about the different dates of registration that we have, and we will leave time at the end for some Q&A. So if you have questions, don't hesitate to reach out, use your Q&A at the bottom, but we will save time at the end for any questions that don't get answered or they come up later in the webinar.
Thanks, Josh.
Absolutely. So yeah, thanks, Joe. We'll go ahead and turn it over to Joe and enjoy the webinar.
Great, you guys. Thanks for tuning in, so to speak. We really are here to get your questions answered. So if you have questions during the seminar, maybe some of you don't have the time to spend for the entire seminar, that's fine. Either chat your question in the chat bar, or you could say, excuse me, let's try that. Because really, I want to get your questions answered as best I can. So I do have a basic presentation. I'll give it to you now on the PowerPoint. And then we could also open up questions at the end, but again, don't be shy. So one thing I want to say, like, why Boston University? Because you guys have a lot of choices out there for paralegal programs, and hopefully you're all doing your due diligence and you've come to BU because it's intriguing you. And let me tell you a little bit more about the Boston University program. First and foremost, the curriculum for the paralegal certificate program here at BU is developed and owned by BU faculty. And that's important because a significant number of paralegal certificate programs out there are generic, canned. They are put together by a small group, not associated in private practice, and then they're marketed out to various universities and colleges, and they're sort of private labeled under their names, but it's not their program. Why does this matter? It matters a great deal because what you're getting at BU is a fully actualized paralegal certificate program. It's not just text on a page. We don't want that. We've studied a great deal in distance learning, and we pride ourselves at Boston University in understanding sort of the dynamics for making an engaging online program. So that's what we've done with our paralegal certificate program. We make sure it's not just text, that there's video, recorded video, there's discussion boards, that all the instructors and teaching assistants are experts in their field, in the specific areas they're talking, and the paralegals are also working in that field. We've got interactive dialogue boxes. We put a lot into the program, including these live classrooms, which is in a format very similar to this. So it's a very tailored, unique, dynamic, and engaged program. It's not just reading text and it's different than these private label programs. It's far more engaging. We also wanted to make the program a little bit more significant. So we put in a module called Legal Technologies. And that, like all areas right now, computers, I mean, obviously everything is so internet and web connected that we wanted to make sure that you guys graduating our program understand the various technologies in specific to the legal field. So we've got some very specific legal softwares that we demo for you and that we engage you to, and you can sort of get online and play with so that you have a thorough understanding of the softwares that are being utilized most frequently in the paralegal field. And I'll get into that a little bit later on. Also, what we focus on in our legal writing class is a methodology called IRAC, Issue, Rule, Application, Conclusion. Most writing paralegal programs, or the part in the paralegal program that involves legal writing, deals with case briefs. We certainly do case briefs. You have to understand how to write a case brief. We kick it up a notch. I think it's very important that students understand the IRAC memorandum, the methodology behind that. It's a methodology for critical thinking that all lawyers study and paralegals, and it elevates your professional communications in the office if you understand that. We also make available to you through the entire 14-week period what's called Westlaw Next, the Westlaw database. That's included in your tuition, online research database. We have some career building tips, some resume, how to hand out a basic entry-level, mid-level paralegal resume. I send that out to everyone in email, then we have a discussion about it. And frankly, it's a good resume, but it's got some mistakes in it. And I like to see if students can find the mistakes, and we engage around that. We also go over the incredible importance of LinkedIn and networking. And we talk about, you know, networking, at least when I was younger, it sounded so formidable, and it really isn't. So I tried to take some of the onerous presence out of networking, and LinkedIn really makes things so much easier. Also, BU's reputation, obviously we're very proud of that, so that's a great reason to take the paralegal certificate program here. We're not only nationally ranked, we're internationally. Presently, I'm teaching a course online. We have students in Australia and Iraq, so we're really globally recognized. And I think you will find, well, I know you will find, because we do the research ourselves, that the cost of our program is much less than the majority. In fact, we only found one program a little bit less expensive than ours by a couple hundred, and they were a private label generic program. And finally, I'm very proud, in the New England area, there's a newspaper called Massachusetts Lawyers Weekly. So in all the New England paralegal programs, we were ranked #1. Boston University certificate program got the first ranking for a paralegal certificate program. So very proud of that. All right, so that's why Boston University. Let me talk to you a little bit more about some of the programs. Again, rankings, testimonials, I kind of covered this. We are 37 in the nation from US News and World Report. You always want to cite to where you're when you give statistics. We learned that in the law. 70th in the world. And #4, best online college from bestschools.org. All right, thanks. So why pursue a career as a paralegal? Paralegals work in a wide variety of areas. Basically, wherever there's business, there's going to be laws, there's going to be regulations, and you know the owners of the business and the management have to make sure that they are in compliance with the law and regulations. So that's every industry, you know, entertainment, healthcare, transportation, retail, all over the place. In addition to sort of the generic all business opportunities, you also have specific fields for employment in the paralegal area. Real estate, litigation, you know, business law. So you have the generic, but you also have a few more in addition to that. And it's very difficult to outsource to foreign countries US paralegal certificate. So it's a great field to participate in right now. Next slide. The outlook of 15% growth through 2026. Over 41,800 jobs. And again, know the source. Whenever you hear a lawyer or paralegals want to give you a significant piece of data, look to see where the source is. We're sourcing Bureau of Labor Statistics, United States Department of Labor. All right, so paralegal outlook is on the rise in terms of employment, and it's solid right now. Next slide. What is it paralegals do and where do they work? You know, paralegals do a little bit of everything, basically. Most paralegals are working in the private sector, though you also have plenty of paralegal jobs in government, federal government, state government, municipal government. And you also have paralegals, in-house paralegals in corporations. But I would say the majority are still working in private law firms, all right? So paralegals, like attorneys, basically what's called they have billable hours. What does that mean to you? For those of you who don't know what that means is the paralegal actually bills the client for the amount of time that they're working on any given project. So if I'm working on something for AT&T and I work on it for 15 minutes, or if I work on it an hour, I actually bill my paralegal rate roughly $100 an hour. I mean, it's kind of all over the place, but let's just say $100 an hour. And that for every hour I work, I'm generating income for the firm. Attorneys also have billable hours. Their billables are all over the place, anywhere from $350 an hour to $1,200 an hour. So why is that important? It's important because clients are savvy, and they started, I would say about 5 to 8 years ago, started sort of rebelling, basically around, it's probably 10 years ago now, 2007, when you have the financial collapse. They started rebelling against paying very high attorney billable hours. They didn't want to spend that much money with an attorney doing all the work when they knew a paralegal could do it at a lesser rate. It wouldn't cost the client as much. So paralegals really, as a profession, started becoming more prominent because it was very client driven. Clients were basically saying, this is paralegal work. We'll pay a paralegal hour. We don't want to pay a high attorney rate. You could supervise them. That's kind of what they do and where they're working right now. And that's sort of why billable hours are good. And paralegals help generate income for a firm, as opposed to a legal secretary who just draws a salary. Not that a legal secretary isn't worth his or her weight in gold, because they are, but they're different. Okay, next slide. Paralegals, I mean, students generally want to know what the salary is, all right? So here's a graph. It's kind of bottom up. Entry levels are all over the place. We're giving you basically entry level starts at 54, some as high as 69. That's going to be somewhat geographic dependent. Again, we're getting this from Salary Wizard. It goes up rather quickly. 5 to 10 years, you're in the 76 to 94,000. Paralegal, 15 years, you could easily be in 6 figures. As you get up in paralegal, you take on management. You're usually going to be managing other paralegals, and you could be in, it's averaging 113 to 133,000. So it is a career in and of itself. It's not a stepping stone to anything. It could be, if you're interested in being a lawyer, it could be a stepping stone to that, and a very good one. But that's not necessary, and it is of itself a sort of end career. So you've got a lot of options available in this. You can make a decent living, and you could use it as a stepping stone to become an attorney, or you could be very happy making 133,000. Right? Next slide. A little bit of our program. BU's been generating paralegal certificates since 1976. At that time, it was a 2-year program. And it was ABA modeled, American Bar Association modeled, and we were that till roughly 2000, 2001. We noticed a decline in our enrollments, and we did a lot of research. And what we found was that there was these newfangled intensive programs, and that instead of taking a program for 1.5 years, 2 years, and spending $20,000, $25,000, students were starting to take very intensive paralegal certificate programs. We were surprised at that. We were surprised that that was cutting into our market, frankly. But we did some research, further research. I was tasked to head that up, and we went to large firms, we went to mid-sized firms, small firms, we went to corporate counsel, and we went to the public sector. And we basically asked them, how are you hiring? Who are you hiring? And what are you looking at when you hire? Is it making a difference if it's these ABA type programs or these new, at that time, new intensive programs? And resoundingly, we got an answer that it was not making a difference. What they were looking for was the value of the name of the school who generated the certificate. And so with that in mind, Boston University switched in 2001 from the traditional ABA to the intensive program. And we've been happy, and our students have been doing fine ever since, placing and getting employment and understanding the field. In 2006, we went online, as you're seeing right now. That's okay, we can go to the next slide. I wanted to have this slide just to give you a sense. Some of you might know Blackboard. It's the software from which you'll take the program. But for those of you who don't, we get a wide demographic of students right out of college. You probably have seen Blackboard at college, to a mid-career changer. I think the oldest person we had was 72. I'm hoping we get someone older. It's a lot of fun. But this is what the screenshot of the average platform is going to look like. So if you'll see, I hope you can read it. You'll see the individual modules, legal research. That's where you're going to see the legal research module. Real estate, you see that. Legal technologies. Those are your individual modules. Subject matters. To the left, you can see you have assessments, assignments, discussion boards. If you click on that tab, that's your sort of vertical gray menu bar. If you click on any one of those tabs, if you click on discussion board, you're going to come to a page that has all your discussion boards. And what's a discussion board? So that's the opportunity for students to interact publicly, because everyone can read everyone's comments. An instructor could say, please tell me the difference between what's a question of fact and what's a question of law. And that's one of the things I do on my discussion board. And students sort of post, I think question of fact is this, and I think question of law is that. So you engage with the instructor in posting on the discussion board. You also engage with other students in your classroom. So you start to get to know them. We have an introduce yourself discussion posting, ask the instructor discussion board. We have an ask your fellow classmate discussion board, and I'll see, because we supervise, we monitor all of them just to make sure it's a safe space for everybody. And students will ask each other, are you having trouble with this homework? What did you find? And they can sort of, like, in my jurisdiction, I found this, but I don't think that's what's happening in the Massachusetts jurisdiction. So there's a bunch of engagement, and I think it makes it very interesting. You also can see on that vertical gray tab, you could click on live classroom. You would click on that. Every module has at least one live classroom, pretty much what we're doing here. And that's a lot of fun because it allows the students to interact with the instructors in real time. Now, here's the thing. We wanted to keep the online process as asynchronous as possible so that students in different time zones, or students, some are mornings, have time in the morning, some people have time in the evening. We wanted you to be able to take the course online when in the time zone that works best for you. But we wanted to also have sort of this live component. So what we did is we'll say basically it's Tuesdays or Wednesdays midweek at 8 p.m. Eastern time. We'll have what's called a live classroom. In order to keep that asynchronous, it will be recorded. So if you can't make that time period, or frankly, you just don't want to, you'd rather watch the recording of it and ask any questions afterwards of that, you can. So it allows students the option to sort of participate in real time with the instructor, or to watch the recording later on at a time that works best for you. But that's sort of the software page, and that's what it'll look like. Okay, next slide. They always tell me I take too long here. So I want to talk to you a little bit about what's being offered and the individual modules, we call them, their subject matters, in the program itself. So the first module that you're going to start the program in is called Legal Research. I'm going to teach that legal research, and basically we're going to cover a lot of stuff. I want everyone to sort of get a basic understanding of the United States legal system. So we go over concepts such as federal jurisdiction and state jurisdiction, and basically what's jurisdiction in general. What does that mean? And what happens when you have a federal law and a state law, all right? Whose law dominates? And where is law even being generated, all right? So you have 5 primary sources of law, that 5 places where law can be generated at any time. The basics, well, of course, constitutional is number one, then statutory, then case law, administrative law, or, and then executive order. So those are the areas. If you're going to do legal research, you have to know where the law is being generated and what databases or what reporter series or digests you're going to find the legal research in, or conduct the legal research in. So we go over all of that, you know, in that first legal research module. The next module is legal writing and reasoning. And basically in legal writing and reasoning, it's a great module to understand the critical thinking of attorneys, like how they look at fact and how they research and find law and how they synthesize fact and law, because that's really what law is all about. Have 50% fact, 50% law, and then you're going to marry the two. We start understanding that process by watching or writing what are called case briefs. Lawyers know case briefs. They basically learn the law, 3 years of law school, by reading published case law and then writing a case brief on it. And it's, you know, there's a very formulaic methodology for writing a case brief. You're deconstructing the case. You're breaking the case down into what are the facts of the case. What's the question of the case? If there's a question, there's an answer. What's the answer of the case? Sometimes people call that the holding of the case. And then what's the application? The application of fact to law, the analysis. You know, how did the judge write that when he or she wrote her court opinion? How did they come to their conclusion, their answer? So that's the case brief. Then, as I said before, we kick it up a notch and we learn how to write an IRAC. This is an acronym for issue, rule, application, or analysis and conclusion. And I give you a couple of hypotheticals and some case law and statutory law, and you learn how to make legal arguments. You learn how to build a legal argument. And when you learn how to build a legal argument, really you're developing a language, a critical thinking methodology that is readily understandable by certain buzzwords: issue, rule, application, that paralegal supervisors and attorneys will immediately understand and glam onto. So it will elevate your written level of communication in the office and far more professional. So it's an exciting module. I also teach that one. I enjoy teaching that one. The next module, legal technologies. I don't teach that one. Yeah, technology is not my forte, but we do have, thankfully, the instructor Alex Hahn, who's our tech guru, and he put together this module. And you know, we want to make sure people understand MS Excel. So lots of you do, but we sort of give an advanced version, and we do it so that you can't have a paralegal certificate and not understand Excel. So for those of you who have been exposed, and it was a while ago, it's a refresher. For those of you who've never seen it, it's an opportunity. And for those of you who know it well, check us, make sure we're doing it right. We go over that. We go over what's called internet research. I teach legal research, but part of the law is also factual research. So Alex in the legal technologies class goes over the different databases where a lot of paralegals and attorneys are doing factual research. So you'll get that in the legal technologies module. You'll also go over what's called cloud computing. Now we all know the cloud's up there. There are very specific rules for paralegals and attorneys as to what they can put on the cloud, how they can put it on, because you're dealing with very confidential client information. So you have to make sure that that's protected. So we go over the various ways of putting client information on a cloud. We go over very specific legal softwares, mostly CaseMap, Pacer, Clio. You'll learn about these. They're management, law office management, litigation management, and filing systems, how things are filed in various courts. They're very important. You'll also go over the concept of what's called e-discovery, electronic discovery. It's a very fertile area for just factual discovery. You know, everything is online now. So like e-discovery would be if you're in a car accident, someone's going to want to see your phone, and they're going to want to see what the metadata is on your phone, and they can now legally discover that. Why would they want to see that? They want to know if you're texting at the time of the accident. All right. So How do you get that metadata? What are you entitled to? What are you not entitled to? That's all going to be covered in the e-discovery. Probate and family law is another one. There's a lot of bread and butter stuff for both paralegals and attorneys. Estate planning, you know, do you hold just a regular will, or do you put it in trust? What's the difference, the pros and cons of each? Unfortunately, a lot of family law is separation, divorce, child support, and probate. You know, if you're drafting a will, if paralegals are drafting a will, lots of times, you know, when the person dies, the deceased, the family will go to the firm where the will was drafted and say, you know, he appointed me executor. I have no idea what an executor does. If you've ever been an executor, it's a pain in the butt. There's a lot of work involved. It's very specific. And most times paralegals at the firm that drafted the will guide the executor through the process. So you have to know that process so you can explain it to your client's executor. You need to go to the court, you need to bring this, show up on this date, just talk to the judge, it'll be fine. You know, you can sort of guide the client through that, but you have to understand it first. So we go over that. Okay, those are 4. The next page, we've got 3 more, 7 modules. Real estate closing, I mean, this is bread and butter stuff again. You're gonna give you a hypothetical situation and we're going to walk you through how to close it. And I will say, you know, each one of these modules, the 7 modules, 2 weeks each, that make up the 14-week course, we've taken out a lot of the theory that was in the program prior to 2000, the longer 1.5 to 2 year program. We've taken out a lot of theory and we really bare boned it into nuts and bolts skill set. That's what we're trying to impart to you guys in this certificate program. It's like, what does a paralegal need to know when they sit down and start their job? So we want to give you the forms, show them to you, show you how to fill them out. So if you go to a real estate firm, you're going to know what a closing disclosure statement is because you're going to have filled one out in class. You're going to know what title is and how to research titles, you know, both physically in the courtroom, and now title research is being done online in different databases. So you're going to go through all of that in the class, the actual skill sets that you would bring in each of the modules that you would bring to the private sector when you go to work. Same with litigation. You're going to go through the entire litigation process. You know, how does a case get started? What is a complaint? Does a paralegal draft a complaint? Often, yes. How would a paralegal draft a complaint? Through factual research, through a lot of cutting and pasting, because all firms have databases of all complaints, everything they've done. So you need to know, how do I retrieve it? How do I make it germane to the facts of this case right here? How do I adapt it? So you go through what a paralegal does in each stage of a litigation process. The federal rules of civil procedure. You know, what do? Do you draft dispositive motions, summary judgments, motions to dismiss? We go through each one of these to make sure you understand the nuts and bolts of the litigation practice of a paralegal. And finally, we talk about the business law module. A lot of paralegals working in business. Secured transactions are all going to be governed by Article 9 of UCC, Uniform Commercial Code. We give you that. We show you what it's about and how it's utilized. We talk about the differences between the formation of partnerships and the formation of corporations. You know, how do you form a corporation? Why would you form a corporation over a partnership? All of those different stages, and because paralegals are very involved in a lot of them. What are the tax implications? And finally, in the business law module, we talk about copyrights, trademarks, definitely, and a little bit of patents, though I would say not a ton of patents. It's a very niche market. If you have an engineering undergraduate degree, it's something you should definitely follow. It's patent paralegals are up here in terms of employability, marketability, and salary, but you need a very specific, very scientific background for it. Great, next slide, please. How will I become comfortable with the online platform? Prior to beginning the 14 weeks, 2 weeks before, we present an orientation time. It's, you know, you come at your own time. Basically, you're going to see the Blackboard platform, And we have little fake assignments just so you learn how to post, so you learn how to submit an assignment. It's sort of, you're basically learning the Blackboard software so that when you start the class, you will have experience with it. Instructor interaction. All my instructors and paralegal teaching assistants, we have about 24 hours to answer every question, though the truth is they're generally answered in 6 or 12 hours. So there's several ways you can get in contact with your instructor. Well, one, if you're in the live classroom live, you ask your questions over that in real time. You also have internal messages, which is basically an email system built into Blackboard. So you can submit a private message that only your teaching assistant and instructor will see. And that's usually more of a personal nature. You know, I'm having a struggle. It's something you don't want everyone to see. You don't want them made public for the rest of the class. You just want it between yourself and the teaching assistant. So, you know, internal messaging is one way, and those are checked all the time to see if there's a student asking any questions. We also, in one of the discussion boards, you have the possibility of posting your question in the public discussion board. So every other student sees your question and every student sees the instructor's response. So you have your option of doing it privately through internal messages or publicly through the discussion boards. I generally encourage the discussion boards, because if you have a question, another student is going to benefit from your question and hopefully our response. It's part of the learning process. But if you're a shyer person and you don't want to make it public, that's fine too, internal message. So you have your options. Every module is graded. All right, instructors have their own individual criteria for grades. They will announce that to you the first day of each module. You have to maintain a B- average for the overall course, but you can get a C in individual modules as long as you get an A to bring that overall average at the end to a B-. Our philosophy is that you're generally adult learners. This is not a matriculating program. You're not getting a degree, you're getting a certificate. So we're really focusing on providing you the skill sets, not as concerned with grades, but you know, they're there. I guess this is my way of saying is like, generally grades are not a problem if students are showing up. If students don't show up, then yeah, it's going to be a problem. But you know, again, that's very rare. This is what's called a MELT, M-E-L-T rate. How many people start the program and how many people end. BU has a 92% MELT rate, which is a very high standard of people initiating and successfully completing. CEUs, yeah, are there CEUs? Yes, upon successful completion, you're 8.4 CEUs, if that's important to you. Next slide. We will, I believe, send out this PowerPoint presentation so you have it. What you're seeing here are from each of the 7 modules. There's a 4-minute or a 3-minute YouTube link where each instructor or teaching assistant talks about that model. So those are actually embedded in the program as an introduction at the beginning, but you get to see it now and just sort of understand like, oh, this is what it's like. And from the sort of what I'm doing now, but each instructor who's responsible for teaching that module is the one talking. Next.
All right, thanks, Joe. And I just wanted to actually jump in here and talk a little bit about the affordability of the certificate program. So the total cost of tuition is actually $3,995, and that does include access to Westlaw Next. Actually, all of the, well, we'll get to that, but all of the books and all of the course materials are included in that $39.95 total. There are no additional fees for applying or registering for the program. So you're basically just registering online, filling out a quick form, and then making one of the payment options available. And that's really all there is to it to get registered. And as far as the technology and the software required to complete the coursework, as Joe mentioned earlier with Excel, you will need access to Microsoft Office as well as a good internet connection. Technologically, it's not that large of a requirement, but the reason we mentioned the internet connection is because we want to have the ability to attend the live class. It's not a mandatory live class, but it is something that if you want to be able to attend it, you have to have a good enough internet connection that you can stream it, that you can not have any disruptions with that. It also is offered as a video format, so it does get recorded, and you can go back in later on and watch it. So again, you would want to be able to stream a video or download the video to watch later on. Also, one last note is that the program can't be done completely on a tablet. It's not optimized for a tablet, so you will want to have access to a laptop or a computer to do this program. So in regards to the registration and the next steps, we do have set starts throughout the year. Our next class is actually going to begin on July 3rd of 2018. And then our registration deadline is actually June 22nd. And then, so we are registering now through June 22nd. And to review the funding options and payment options, there's the link up on the screen, as well as the registration link. And then you could also call, if you'd like to speak to me or one of the admissions counselors, you can call 857-366-9338, or my actual direct line is 857-366-9309. 9309, yeah, sorry. 857-366-9309. So that's pretty much the end. I've noticed that we haven't really had any questions come through throughout the webinar. So apparently Joe was quite exhaustive with his presentation today. So I do want to thank him for that. But we do have a little bit of time at this point. So if you do have questions about the program that you would like Joe to answer, we'll go ahead and just take a minute here and see if any come in.
Absolutely. This is your opportunity. So feel free. It looks like Kristen is asking a question. Oh, thank you very much. Kristen asks, can we use a certificate in any state? It's a great question, Kristen, and I can tell you from my latest research, and I'm always a little bit nervous because, you know, that's 50 states. I'm not exactly sure of every single state's requirement, and they change and they're flexible. Yes is my basic answer, but there's different states are going to make certain distinctions between the ABA and the non-ABA, and then Northeast, there's basically no distinction. I don't think there's distinction in Texas or Midwest. I know California has a little bit of a distinction, and what California might, I believe what they do is they have a 3-tiered approach. So if you have not taken any certificate, any sort of paralegal study program, you have to work with a private attorney for 3 years before you can call yourself a paralegal, all right? And if you've taken an intensive program like ours, like the BU program, you work with an attorney for a year, and then you can call yourself a paralegal. If you took a 2-year American Bar Association ABA program, you can start after that 2nd year completing the program, you can call yourself a paralegal. So our program still is in play, and frankly, you would call yourself a paralegal from our program quicker than the 2-year program. But so states have, some states, and very few actually from my latest research, make a distinction. No state is going to grant certification, all right? There's a difference between a certificate and certification. So no state requires certification. Like attorneys need certification. They need to pass the bar for the individual state. That's not true for paralegals. So what you get is a certificate, and they want to see that certificate, but it's distinct, so the licensing is distinct. I will say in the Northwest, there's starting to be some interesting, I think, movement. I believe it's in Washington and possibly Oregon, where you have a slightly higher level. It's called a limited legal technician. It's not a paralegal. It's actually a step between paralegal and attorney. It's kind of beyond our scope here, but basically what that's allowing in very more limited circumstances, paralegals don't, not paralegals, legal technicians don't work under the supervision of attorney, but can have their own clients. This was done because there's a feeling that there was an underserved population in those areas that could not afford attorneys, and they couldn't afford the high billable rates of attorneys, but they still needed some sort of expertise in legal representation. So they started to create, it's kind of like if you have an LPN, an RN, and a nurse practitioner. A nurse practitioner can give out prescriptions, right? An LN and RN, I don't think can. So you're starting to see a little bit, but that's only 2 states, and they needed to be paralegals first. They needed to have the certificate. Okay. I'm reading questions from cards. Josh, help me out. Am I missing anything?
Yeah, I was going to jump in. Actually, I was going to say Lucretia had actually asked. She missed, I guess, the beginning of the presentation. So she was asking, is there any type of testing or proof of previous studies to get into the program?
There isn't, Lucretia. It's an interesting and it's a good question. All right. So, are there any sort of admission criteria that has to be established? I put together the program for Boston University. I was a director of it. I still am a director of it. At Boston University, at all universities, no one person does it. You need a team. You need to be able to team. There has to be people put on that. One of the questions, and I put together a team, so there were 3 working paralegals and 5 attorneys, and we all looked at, different aspects of how the paralegal program would work. Do we make it pass-fail? Do we make it graded? Questions like that. And one of the questions that came up for us was, do we have some sort of criteria for entering the program, a GPA, a college degree, something along those lines? We wanted to keep the cost down. So GPA, stuff like that no one was really doing that, and that wasn't gaining much traction. But I wanted to make it that you could have, or you had to have your undergraduate degree. And one of the people on my team, a working paralegal that I put on the team, gave me a lot of flack on that. She's like, I don't think we should limit people and all this. But I kept arguing, but they're going to be competing against people with undergraduate degrees. So they should know that. Afterwards, long story short, she came up to me. She's a working paralegal. She's worked for me as a paralegal before. And she said, I didn't really feel comfortable saying this in the meeting with everyone listening, but the reason I made a big deal about it is you should know, I don't have my undergraduate degree. I've been a working paralegal for 22 years and I've not needed it. And, I stand on my own, and it really sort of opened my eyes. I had great respect for her professional capabilities, and she's persuaded me. But I'm glad you asked, because anyone looking at this course should know very clearly that the majority of people who are getting a paralegal certificate have an undergraduate degree. All right. So if you don't have that and you take this program, you're in competition with people who have an undergraduate degree. There are ways around that. And I would say the 2 ways around that is the first job's always going to be your hardest. So if you know people in the field, or if you have legal experience, if you've been a legal secretary, so to speak, and you've got the sort of connections to get that first job, then I think you're going to be okay. All right. But it's just going to be that first job that is going to be harder because you're going to be in competition. But if you have a network that you can help get that first job, then I think it would be okay. I hope that, thanks for the question, Lucretia. I hope that answered it. Yes, Josh. Josh, if you could just read me the questions, because reading them and talking is just something I'm not good at.
Absolutely. I'm just looking through them too. It looks like someone asked, they have 20 years plus in commercial insurance, and he's asking, once he completes this certificate program, do you have specialist certifications in different fields, such as like workman's comp or commercial general liability, for example?
No, I don't know programs that have that at all. It's not just that BU doesn't. I don't think any paralegal program has that, but it is a good question. And this is what I would suggest. So most, it's like I can't speak for every paralegal program out there. There's hundreds. I've looked at the majority of them. I've compared ours to theirs, so I know what's being offered by the vast majority and what their costs are. I can sort of get to your question this way. Once you get the certificate, all right, that's going to enable you to take other courses. And if you want to get into areas of specialty, like immigration law or insurance, what I forgot where the guy was coming from, where the question was coming from, then you could qualify to take continuing legal education classes. Like I know in Massachusetts, MCLE, Massachusetts Continuing Legal Education. For someone who has a paralegal certificate and for attorneys, they have very inexpensive courses. You know, it depends on the course, but it could be anywhere from $50 to $300, depending on how many days or how long. But you might take a $50 course in immigration law, or a $200 course over, 3 Saturdays from 9 to 4. Nah, it would be even that long. In criminal justice. So you can get various areas of expertise through continuing legal education classes, and every state offers those to attorneys and paralegals, and those are offered at much lesser prices than the certificate prices that are being out there now. I hope that helps.
And then we actually had another question. We had a couple questions, and I think you kind of addressed this as far as like the state to state issue. We had a question about if somebody thought that this would be sort of a valid certificate in North Carolina. And also another good question was, in general, are legal documents relatively uniform throughout the entire United States?
They are and they aren't. Most are uniform. Here's the thing. The process is uniform. The methodology is uniform. The individual documents may not be. Now, they will be if you're talking federal, because half of legal work is federal and half is state. All right, so what happens when you do it state? The basic concepts and methodology are going to be similar, but there will be some distinctions. I can tell you, I was very surprised. In the last week, I closed on a house in California. And I'm from the Northeast. I know how to do a closing in the Northeast area. In California, crazy people out there. It's like it was a different process. And it was sort of eye-opening for me. And in some cases, it was a much simpler process. So there are differences, all right? But the background of how to close and understanding what happens in the Northeast, where I'm used to, informed my understanding of how to do that in California. Think of it this way. People go to law school in 50 different states, all right? They're not restricted to learning that state's law and they can only practice in that state. No, what you're learning is the methodology. Even if there's different states, the research is going to be the same, in California or in Massachusetts. The methodology for doing that research is the same. The databases will be different, but that's it. The writing is going to be the same, all right? Then you have some transactional classes. Business law is going to generally be governed by federal law, but some state law is going to come into it. So basically my way of saying no course is going to talk about individual 50 states. You learn the basic methodology, the understanding of how what the issues are and how they're generally resolved, and then you get educated into that state that you're in once you start working and doing research for that. I hope that helped.
Great. And then we actually had one more question about access to something like BU Career Services. Is that made available to certificate students?
No, that's not available to certificate students, but what we do is I have 2 live classrooms. One, and I talked a little bit about it before, we talked about how to write a resume, and I didn't used to have that in the program. I designed the program, but then I started seeing people's resumes and I was like, oh my God, some people, understand what needs to be present in a modern resume and some people don't. So I make sure all students have that knowledge and they have a specific example and format. We go over that. And also how to do the professional networking. We talk about that. So we're trying to give you the tools again to provide that. And I don't want to slam too hard any schools that say come use our career services, but the truth of the matter is basically all they're going to have is a database of people who have employed before, recent graduates or older graduates. They're not that. I have a nephew at a very good school right now, and he was complaining to me about their career services. No one helps you get a job but you. That's just the truth. And what we try to do is give you the tools to make that as seamless and that you understand sort of the process to do that. So you're prepared for it.
very much. Oh, we just had another question come in. So is Westlaw the only database available to students, or do we also offer LexisNexis?
That's a good question, Danielle. Westlaw is the only one available. We sent out the course for those of you who don't know, there's two major competitors, Westlaw, Westlaw Next, and LexisNexis. I would say the majority, at least in the Northeast, I'm not sure for the rest of the country, the majority clearly uses Westlaw Next. Both are utilized throughout the country. We sent out the basically to Westlaw Next and to LexisNexis bid process, who would give us the best price, the lowest price to utilize their databases. Westlaw Next came in with the lowest price that we can pass that on to our students in the tuition. There's no extra cost. What the tuition is the tuition, but part of that tuition encompasses the lower cost of the Westlaw Next bid. So that's why we use Westlaw Next. But really, it's like if you use Google, if you use Chrome, if you use Safari, once you know one, you're going to know how to use the other. Questions?
And we actually have a question. I think either one person's asked more than once, or a couple people have asked, but do we offer sort of any type of advanced paralegal program beyond this one?
No, we don't. I don't know that many people are asking for that. I don't know that there's a demand out that when I say many, I don't think employers are particularly looking for that either. Yeah, so we don't. Again, I would refer you to your individual jurisdiction or state's continuing legal education courses if you want to get a little more expertise. Those are really good for networking too. So if you wanted to learn something on immigration law, we don't specifically cover immigration in our paralegal program, but we cover research and we cover writing. So those are all sort of important and help you understand it. I would refer you to the CLE, MCLE, Mass Continuing Legal Education, for $50. You're going to learn the specific immigration policies. So you're going to, one, learn the information, which is important in and of itself, but two, you're also going to be networking with your fellow classmates, meeting them, interacting with them, and they're going to be people who have an interest in that area, and the instructor who has an expertise in that area, and probably some of those classmates are already working in it. So it sort of serves, by taking those courses, you're kind of doing a dual function as to getting the specific information, but also networking in a specific area that you would like to guide your career, presumably.
So, well, I guess maybe if there are any other questions. Okay.
Duke, I'm just reading a question now about Duke. I don't think so.
I'm actually, I've looked at Duke's program. I did not realize that they offered advanced certificates. I know that they offer a paralegal certificate that's also 14 weeks, but I have not personally seen that it was an advanced certificate. So that's actually news to me.
I've not heard of an employer asking for that.
Okay. Well, thank you again, Joe, for answering so many questions, and then for our presentation. And to everyone attending, I do appreciate you attending our paralegal program today, and I hope you found it informative. Again, if you have more questions, or if you're interested in registering for our next start, which is on July 3rd again, don't hesitate to call me directly at 857-366-9309, or you can also email me at jsnow@paralegalonline.bu.edu. So thanks again, Joe, and everyone, have a good rest of your afternoon.
Great. Hope to see you guys online. Good luck with your decision. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.